I don't think it's fair to have to compare. Just because they're different doesn't make them any less important.
She also suggested that there's a lot of money in doubles that could go elsewhere.
Not even keep a straight face to that comment.
Hey guys, welcome back to the tennis vlog and another episode of the talk show, where today I am joined by a GB doubles specialist who has a career high ranking of world number 46. And I don't have an official stat on this, but she may well be the only player last year to win a title and not lose a match, which is quite the record to have. Anna Smith, welcome to the tennis vlog. How are you?
I think that's the best introduction I've ever had.
Yes.
I think just for the sort of the people watching, we have to, tell them that it was one tournament I played.
Yeah.
So it's only 4 matches unbeaten. But I'll take whatever I can get.
It's a fact. Just make it sound as good as you possibly can. We might as well dive in to begin with why that's the case and why you didn't play more tennis last year, because a lot's happened over the past day or so to do with doubles, and you're a doubles specialist, so we'll be talking more about that later in the video. But the first reason I wanted to get you on was to talk about your injury struggles in recent times and how you've dealt with that, because I know you've been hit with it quite a lot. So given that the coronavirus situation has set everyone back, no one's able to play, the tour is on hold, you've been injured, out with injury, out having had surgery most of the past year and a half. So how does that affect you? Is it different mentally for you than it would be for other players? Is it more frustrating? How's it been?
I think for me, it probably hasn't affected me as much, obviously, compared to all the other girls. Essentially, I'm injured, so I can't really play. So for me, obviously, the whole pandemic hasn't really kind of had too much of an effect. I wouldn't be on court anyway. So I think my mentality compared to what the players going through this now is completely different. But like you said, I have been injured sort of for the past 18 months, which has been, obviously a struggle. But I was kind of lucky in the sense that I had my surgery pretty much 10 days before lockdown happened. So I was quite lucky to kind of squeeze in the operation. But it's a hard time for everyone, and I think everyone's just trying to make the best of a kind of bad situation. But you kind of see people are starting to play, and obviously the LTA released a statement today saying they're going to do some domestic tournaments, which I think is great, and it kind of gives people a light at the end of the tunnel, which I think is kind of what we all need and what we all want, just something to strive for, because I guess most of us have kind of just been kind of drifting and not knowing when there's going to be something to look forward to. So I think speaking to some of the girls, I think it's been a great thing to just have a target for them.
Yeah, for sure. You have to have something to keep you going. And it wasn't only Roger Federer then that timed his surgery to perfection. Round of applause to you as well.
Thank you.
So what have you been up to besides acing the quizzes I set every weekend? What else have you been up to during lockdown? How have you been
basically just researching the quizzes during the week. And then, yeah, that's been the main thing though. To be honest, it's just been a lot of rehab, trying to kind of do as much as I possibly can in this time, which obviously hasn't been too much. For the first sort of 6 to 8 weeks, I was in a brace and on crutches and kind of sofa ridden for the most part. But thankfully I've got a bike here, can do some things, so that's kind of keeping me sane, taking up some time during the day. A lot of Netflix binging, quizzing,
Who doesn't?
Exactly. I think it seems to be the new fashionable thing, but just trying to keep as positive as I can, really.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the most important thing. And I guess that's something that you've had the opportunity to work on over the past couple of years. So I was looking back at your history on the tour and your previous results. I think it was, correct me if I'm wrong, but it might have been exactly 3 years ago to this day that you won your first WTA title. It was certainly around this time.
Yeah, I think it was the 27th of May.
27th of May. There you go. Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
You're welcome. First WTA title there. A year later, so May 2018, you hit your career high ranking of world number 46. And I believe it was shortly after that you had your first surgery, which you didn't realize would be your first of a few. So that was July 2018. Take us back to then. And what was your mentality at that time? And could you have anticipated the way the next 18 months would play out?
No, not really. It wasn't quite what I had, planned.
Mm,
I think, sort of giving a brief history, I've always had knee problems even from when I was sort of 21, 22. So it's something that I've been dealing with for a long time. And I had previously seen surgeons and specialists in regards to things that I could do. So I'd kind of been managing the situation. But in sort of end of 2016, start of 2017, it kind of got to the point where I was struggling with training, being able to do the enough hours on court, and just kind of constantly being in pain. I'd reached a point where I was kind of fed up with the constant slog against my body. The tennis tour is hard enough as it is. So I spoke with some surgeons, and this was the first time they'd actually said that, there was something that surgically could be done. So
okay.
at the start of that year, 2017, I'd already made the decision that after Wimbledon, I was going to have the surgery. I decided that that was going to be the part of the year that I would miss the least amount of tennis, so I could still play 3 slams and just miss the US Open.
Sure.
So I think I had the surgery the Tuesday after Wimbledon finished.
Okay.
So that was always in the diary. But then obviously in terms of recovery and everything that happened, it was a lot longer than I had anticipated.
Mm,
Um, so obviously I sort of, my last tournament was Wimbledon 2017, and then I didn't get back on court until play another tournament until September the following year. So there was obviously a hell of a long break in the two. But that wasn't what I planned, and obviously I had another surgery, and it was tough because you have this plan in your head, and then all of a sudden things don't quite go how you anticipated. So it ended up being quite a long process.
yeah, I mean, it certainly sounds trying. I feel like, surgeries in everyday life, if someone says they're going to have a surgery, everyone, treats it a thing of major importance as it is. Look after the person, make sure they're comfortable, do what you can for them, etc. I feel like with sports people, it almost becomes normal, like, oh, so and so have a surgery, and you expect them to come straight back, as if nothing's been wrong, and just kind of take it in their stride. But it is a big deal, especially when you're having more than one. So would you say that the physical aspect or the mental aspect is most difficult to deal with, or the two come hand in hand?
That's a tough question because I think it kind of depends on the surgery you have. So
Okay.
initially, the first few surgeries that I had were quite not small, but smaller.
Okay.
It was just arthroscopies. So that was in terms of physically how I felt after them. I was okay. I was sort of up and around. Even when I had that surgery after Wimbledon, it was both knees and I had them micro fractured, but I was still able to walk. So I was kind of obviously sort of um, I was quite fragile, but I still was able to do certain things, and I could still rehab and things like that. Whereas the last surgery that I had was a pretty big surgery, and you kind of don't realize how much it takes out of you. So I think it very much depends on the person, obviously, and the type of surgery that you have. But it's all about, I suppose, in the end, you have to try and realize that it's for the greater good and to try and make you better. You obviously are going to have days where you don't feel great and you're feeling down about things, but you just need to try and keep as positive as you can, and kind of set yourself little targets to try and keep improving, because then at least you see the benefits of it, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, I kind of came into this thinking that maybe the whole situation at the moment is frustrating for you, given how much time you've spent off court in the first place. But having said what you said, are you then viewing this as a positive for you, that your body gets the rest it needs? Because you wouldn't have seen yourself getting back to competition anytime soon, right?
No, correct. And also the fact that I was in a brace and on crutches for the first sort of 6 weeks, I wouldn't have been able to do anything anyway. So for me, it really didn't make any difference. It's just obviously now I would have been able to start getting back to doing rehab, had hoped to see physio and things like that. But in the grand scheme of things, I'm still able to do things and still make little gains up until when things start to get back to normal again. So you do kind of have to make the best of a bad situation. Everyone's in the same boat. People aren't able to get back on court, haven't been had access to a gym. So there are situations where you kind of just do what you have to do, and kind of this is one of them.
Mm. You are, I mean, you're closer towards the back end of your career now than you were when you started out, let's put it that way. I'm not saying you're old by any means, although I did find out that I was 7 years old when you played your first professional match. So
Oh,
not to
wow.
try and make you feel
Really?
old, but yeah, that's kind of crazy, right? But yeah, so you're further in, and you've done a lot more than you would have done 5-10 years ago, made several WTA finals, etc. So really, if you wanted to, you could call it quits now and have had a really good career. So what's the kind of thing that keeps you motivated when you're dealing with all these injuries to still keep going and to give it another try?
I think it's just the love for the game. You know, there's nothing quite like being able to step on a match court and competing and you know, having that crowd and that winning feeling. And I think that's why we all, you know, play sport, whatever your sport is. And that's something that I've certainly missed. You know, even just getting back last year and playing the $25,000 just at Roehampton, and even just having people there. You know, I've been fortunate enough to play on, you know, court number one at Wimbledon and other big courts around the world. But you know, there's nothing quite like having people watching and cheering you on as to kind of get that adrenaline rush. So I think it's a mixture of love for the sport, love of competing. But don't get me wrong, it's hard. You know, it's you know, waking up every day, going to training, and kind of sometimes, you know, constantly being in pain. That can kind of get you down. But ultimately, you kind of think why you're doing it, and that's what gets you through the tough days.
Yeah, for sure. Let's rewind a bit. Let's go back right to the beginning when you first picked up a racket. I remember speaking to you actually about this last year, and I was surprised at how late you came to the sport in comparison to some other players, which I think other people will find interesting because you hear the stories of 2-3-year-old Rafael Nadal getting his tennis court and going out to practice, but that isn't actually the case for all pros. So give people an idea of what your background was, other sports you played, and how it was you came to play tennis in the first place.
So for me, it was, I think I was about 10 when I started playing. So I was obviously quite sort of an old an old girl when I started playing, if
So
you can
old.
say. Yeah, I know, right? But for me, when I was younger, I just loved sport in general. I was always, you know, swinging a golf club around, kicking a football. And I basically saw Wimbledon on TV and decided, Mum, Dad, can I have some lessons? So we went down to the local club, and that's sort of where it went from there. Um, and then for me, it obviously kind of, you know, spiraled. But at the same time, I was playing football as well. And then it reached a point where I had to choose between the two. And tennis was something that I decided was going to be a career for me. But yeah, you obviously see the other people who have started from literally the age that they can walk. And, you know, but that's the thing with tennis, the beauty of it is that everyone can take different paths. And anyone who says, oh, you know, I think I remember I was about 13 and I went to regional training and I got told by the coach at the time that I was too old.
Wow.
And that was at 13 years old. So, you know, no one should tell you when you should start, what you should do, because tennis is so individual and there's not one standard path that anyone can take. And I think, you know, if you're passionate about it and you want to do it, you know, go for it. Doesn't matter if you're 5, 6, 7, 10, 11, 12, you know, there's time.
Yeah, I love that, and you definitely proved them wrong, so that's good. Have you ever looked back and wondered, because I know you were very into football, have you ever wondered like how things might have played out if you'd gone the other way? Have there ever been any regrets?
I mean, you know, I like team events. I've noticed that, especially with Fed Cup and being fortunate to be a part of that, how much I love the team events. So obviously, you know, playing football would have been something that I would have loved, but you can obviously still play socially. So in a sense, you can look back and say, oh, you know, what would have happened if I'd have played football or carried on with that? But then at the same time, I wouldn't have had all the experiences and met all the people and managed to achieve all the things that I have if I hadn't played tennis. So I don't have any regrets. You know, tennis has brought me so much in my life that I'm very happy with the decision that I made.
Sure. Well, looking at the present then, you're a doubles specialist, but you didn't start out as a doubles specialist. So at what point did you make that decision to go doubles only? Because you were playing singles starting out.
Yeah, I obviously, you know, most people don't go into playing tennis to obviously become a double specialist. But for me, I think what was the kind of defining factor between me ending my singles career and starting doubles was essentially if I wouldn't have been able to carry on with singles, I had too many issues with my knees. So it was either do I want to, you know, carry on and play doubles, which was something that I loved, and I'd had a fair bit of success without even really focusing on it? Or do I want to stop the sport altogether? And bear in mind, I think I was around 24, 25 when I made this decision. And I wasn't ready to retire. You know, I still had so many things I wanted to achieve in the sport, and I kind of would have had a lot of regrets had I retired then. So that's when I made the decision, and I said, look, I realised I have limitations with my body, that I'm going to give it everything I can to try and forge a doubles career. And you know, I've had most of my success in doubles and had so many things come from it. So I think it was probably the best decision I could have made.
Absolutely. So doubles hit the headlines over the last day. We get controversial now. We love this.
I love a bit of controversy.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really surprising how good the weather's been during lockdown, with the amount of people that have been spousing hot air during that time. Marion Bartoli, a certain Marion Bartoli, made some comments about the doubles game very recently, which have certainly divided opinion. I'm just going to read out what she said for the benefit of anyone that isn't aware, and then we're going to kind of break it down and see what your opinions are as a doubles player who's been in the thick of it, who's been on tour and have seen, you know, not just how you yourself go about your business, but these other players as well, and you've got that first-hand knowledge. So Marion Bartoli was being interviewed, and she said, of the doubles game, I don't understand all these doubles tournaments all year round. I understand during Grand Slams and the Olympics because doubles is part of tennis history, but I've been to some tournaments now with my player, and I see now these doubles players, they have crews, like 6 people around them. When I was a player, as a singles player, we couldn't afford to pay 6 people to travel with us full time. They can afford to pay 6 people and they just play doubles. Why don't you get some of that money to qualifiers, to someone who plays only challenges? I just don't understand, because in doubles you just don't make the same effort as a singles player. You don't practice as much. They keep going week in, week out, getting that money. I don't know if we have to stop doubles completely, but to get less money and give that money to qualification and others, that should be a solution, is what she said. Okay, Anna, where do we start? Let's start.
Can we just put it in a shredder and just get rid of it?
Oh boy. Let's actually start with the general way that doubles is viewed, because I think, unfortunately, this might not be an opinion that's just held by Bartoli. I think we see across the board, you know, with the events that are broadcast, with the events that get the coverage, doubles is treated as secondary to singles. And personally, I think that there are a lot of factors that make that the case. But for you, you are a doubles player. What do you think is the biggest factor for doubles arguably being as underrated as it is?
How long have we got, and where do I start?
Just go. Let rip.
Yeah, the thing is, for me, I think doubles is massively underrated, undervalued, and just not really shown anywhere in the media. It's not given any attention. And you know, obviously Bartoli is you know, allowed to have her opinion, and I think some people do agree with her, and some people say, you know, doubles isn't a crucial part of tennis. But I think if you look at grassroots tennis here, especially in the club culture, do you ever see any members really playing singles? Everyone who plays doubles. So for her to say, and I think even if you look in around Europe as well, a lot of clubs will play doubles. So I think it's a very undervalued part of tennis. And I think also, you know, the ATP and the WTA and all of those bodies need to get better at, you know, highlighting the fact that we have so many talented players who do just play doubles and who have been very successful. Is she trying to say someone like a Jamie Murray hasn't, you know, got what he deserved and the money he's made and the titles he's won? You know, is he any, you know, just because it's not something that she necessarily believes in, who's to say that, you know, it's not an important part of it? I think it's unfair for her to say that. And you know, bear in mind, she had success in doubles as well. You know, if she didn't think it was an important part, why would she take the money? Why would she take those titles? Don't play them.
Yeah.
So I can't say I agree with any of what she said.
Yeah, I mean, it's important, as you mentioned, she's entitled to an opinion, as we all are, you know, and she has played doubles. I mean, when statements like this are made, part of me wonders if there's an aspect of it that's kind of looking for attention and to kind of make a shockwave, and maybe even create a conversation starter in a time and place where people aren't really doing much. So boredom is dangerous. But I mean, let's go through her opinion and kind of look at some of the points she's made and see what kind of logic is in there. So she suggested that doubles players don't train as hard as singles players. How would you come back on that one?
I don't know if she's ever seen a doubles player train, but I think, but the thing is, for me, again, I think it's just so naive what she's saying. You know, as a singles player, you train in a certain way and you have to focus on certain aspects. But just because you train, you know, different sets of fitness in a doubles sort of thing, you have to be more explosive, you have to be quicker, have a quicker mind. Does that make it any less important just because you don't necessarily have to do that on a singles court? You know, I don't think that, you know, one type of fitness is different to the other. It's like saying that, you know, someone who does a Tour de France and someone who does weightlifting, you know, someone's weightlifting is any less important than something else. You know, I don't think it's fair to have to compare. Just because they're different doesn't make them any less important. You know, I see a lot of the doubles players are in great shape. So just because they don't play singles doesn't make them, you know, any less fit or any less talented, or so I don't think that's a valid point for her. And kind of this round might be a bit controversial, but she wasn't necessarily in the best shape herself. You know, she wasn't known for her fitness. So I think for her to say that, you know, these guys weren't necessarily in the best shape, I think that's quite a harsh statement to make.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with you there. And she also said that doubles players tend to tour, or she has seen doubles players who tour around with a team of 6 people behind them. I can't say that I've really seen that myself from observation. Is that accurate?
No, I can't say that I've seen that. You know, there might be a couple of players that do, but sometimes people share coaches, they have a hitting partner, things like that. But I think for the most part, you see that on the singles side. You look at like the top girls and guys, and they normally have an entourage with them. You very rarely see any of the doubles players, unless it's sort of people in the top 10, and even then they might just have a coach and a hitting partner, or a coach and a physio. So I'm not really quite sure where she's getting this information from. It's almost like she's kind of just plucked it out of the air a little bit.
Yeah, and even so, you'd only expect the top players to be traveling with that kind of entourage, and that many people around them. And it just shows, again, you know, the disrespect towards doubles as opposed to singles, because if a top singles player was to tour around with that kind of team, I don't think anyone would bat an eyelid, because of the popularity of the sport. And, you know, because people can appreciate that to get to the top of the rankings, I think in either discipline, you need to have a large degree of commitment and a large degree of talent. So, I mean, even if someone was doing that, I personally wouldn't have a problem. But, I mean, the question here is whether that's the case in the first place. And I think it's the first time I've ever heard it mentioned anyway. She also suggested that there's a lot of money in doubles that could go elsewhere. I mean, come on, fill us in. That's probably the funniest part,
I could not
right?
even keep a straight face to that comment. If she knew, or if she even paid any attention and did any research, I think she'd realise that that's not the case in the slightest. You know, I think we were talking about it last night. The split between prize money between singles and doubles, I think is something crazy, like 80% to 20% for doubles.
Yep.
And then bear in mind, you're obviously halving that because there's a pair, so you're essentially getting a 10% cut. So for me, it's just, what she's saying is crazy. And like I said, if you look at the Grand Slam qualifying first round for a singles player, it's still more than a main draw doubles player is getting, probably by a few thousand. So for her to say that that money is going to people who kind of don't deserve it, or should be going to kind of lower down, I think that's ridiculous. There's hardly any money in the doubles game, and the people who do play doubles, they do it because they love it. It's not to earn, you know, millions like these singles guys do. So again, I think it's another quite naive comment from her.
Yeah, of course. I was only speaking actually to a coach recently who was saying to me, players in the doubles top 100 are having to think about whether they can continue their careers because they are not supported enough to do all the global traveling and to give that much time to the sport. And it is an all-consuming thing, whether you're playing singles or doubles, you know, with the traveling, with everything that's involved, it consumes your life. So but another thing is, she was suggesting that this money, I mean, the whole point of this conversation, I think, was that they were talking about supporting the lower ranked players, which has been quite a common theme of the lockdown, quite a talking point. And her point was that let's take the money away from these doubles players and send it further down the ranks. But there are doubles specialists further down the ranks, right? I know some personally who are at that level who are coming up. So that's quite ignorant, would you say, on her part? I mean, she's just thinking of the lower ranked singles players, but there are lower ranked doubles specialists as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think for me, what is hard with what she's saying is that, you know, tennis is very top heavy in the sense that so many of the top players are the ones that are making the most money, and yet they keep increasing prize money for those the higher end of the game, which to me is crazy, because you look at, you know, the amount you're making for making slam semis, finals, and winning, you know, for the fact that they keep putting, you know, a few 100,000 in, why don't you channel that money that you're putting towards those grand slams for the people who don't need it? Put that back in towards the game, put it back into the ITF, put it back into the futures and challenges to be able to keep people playing. Because ultimately, at some point, I think especially with this pandemic that's happened, people aren't going to be able to afford to play. And if there's no money in the lower tiers of the game, you know, tennis is going to be wiped out apart from at the top of the game. And I think that would be a really sad day if you know, after sort of 400 or 500, there was no one else playing the game because they just genuinely couldn't afford it. So I think they kind of have to look at the level of prize money in the top end of the game and look if they can filter that down rather than completely taking away doubles.
Yeah, I would agree. And yeah, just looking at those quotes as a whole, you know, to look and say doubles players don't train as hard, they don't deserve the money as much. I think, you know, there are going to be players on both sides, singles and doubles, who aren't giving 100%. I mean, there are some notable examples on the singles side who aren't too quiet about it either. And yeah, it just seems quite unfair to attack doubles like that, especially when it's struggling so much in comparison to singles in terms of getting the coverage that it wants. And I've been quite encouraged actually to see over the period of lockdown on social media, you know, the ATP and the WTA seeming to try and get behind it a bit more, all the doubles hot shots that get promoted. My older brother is not a tennis fan, and he always says to me, doubles is way more interesting to watch than singles because stuff happens. One thing that was on my mind when it comes to these factors that mean that doubles isn't kind of prized as highly as the singles game or valued as much, and then titles aren't viewed as so prestigious. The format of the game is constantly changing wherever you go to. I mean, at Wimbledon, you've still got the best of 5 sets rule, and it's some of the slams, but you know, at some of the other slams it's best of 3 sets, and then you go elsewhere and have a champions tiebreak instead of a third set. So do you think that all this kind of guinea pig trialing of formats on the doubles game and kind of treating it as a sideshow, does that have quite a big impact on the way doubles is viewed?
I do think it doesn't help the sport and doubles in general. Obviously, you know, singles doesn't have one rule for one thing and one rule for other. The biggest difference is, you know, maybe at one slam they play a tie break at 6-all in the 5th set, or you know, they play a long set. So you know, that's about as different as they get. But in terms of doubles, like you said, they obviously have different formats for different events. So I do think that kind of does take away a little bit from it. But you know, ultimately, I don't think that's necessarily the biggest thing. Obviously, a few years ago when they changed it to the no ad and the champions tiebreak, it did take away from it a little bit, because obviously it was kind of geared towards having more singles players playing, because it's obviously less time on court.
Sure.
And that is one thing that does frustrate me a little bit, is when you see singles players entering the doubles draw and playing one match, or just playing it for to play a match. That does frustrate me, because you're taking away a spot from someone who is genuinely working so hard to try and play these events.
Yeah.
And then they win a match and pull out next round. And that is one thing that I do find really frustrating. And until rules change in regards to that, then I think you're kind of always going to be stuck with that. But yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I think if the rules were to change and the doubles was to be made less appealing to singles players who just want more match practice, that would probably help the profile of doubles, because one thing within doubles is that partners aren't always staying and keeping the same team. There's sometimes a lot of switching up, and I know you generally have had the same partners over time. You've competed regularly with them. But when it comes to fans and getting behind certain players or certain teams, I guess it is a bit more difficult when players are switching up. So I think it's been great recently in doubles to see consistent teams at the top, women's side and men's side, who are routinely getting to ATP finals, WTA finals, and giving the discipline a bit more of a profile. So hopefully when this whole coronavirus situation is done, we'll see the continued progression of doubles. But let's look at you specifically, just as we kind of round off. And you know, what are your hopes for the next year or so? Is it as simple as just getting back on court, or do you have ambitions beyond that?
I think what I've realized from all of my time being injured is that, you know, you try not to set too many goals too far in advance. I've had far too many occasions where I've kind of set long-term goals and you end up disappointed. So I think for me, I just want to take it kind of, you know, week by week, month by month, and, you know, basically just try and get my knee as good as I possibly can and get back on court, and kind of that's my main focus. And then, you know, whatever happens from there happens. But you know, I try not to look too far into the future, just week by week.
Yeah, well, that sounds like a sensible approach. Thanks for taking time out of your lovely sunny day in London, not quite, but near enough, to chat. It's always interesting to hear, and you know, this whole situation with the doubles, I'm glad that we were able to look at that a bit. This interview was planned before Bartoli made those comments, but in a way, you know, it gave us something to talk about, to kind of look into that aspect of the game and why it's as undervalued as it is. And you know, hopefully in the near future that can change somewhat. So Anna, thanks for your time. Thank you for watching, and if you've not yet subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that so that you don't miss any future videos, and check out some of the other interviews that I've already done as well. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.